2024, and we are here at the Beaver Creek Chamber of Commerce to do an oral history of for the 50th anniversary of the 1974 Xenia tornado. My name is Mary McKinley, and I'm here with Kathleen. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kathleen Lemming. At the time of the tornado, it was Kathy Hubbard.
So where did you grow up?
Well, mostly in Xenia I grew up. I wasn't born here, but we moved to Xenia when I was about 4 years old. My dad was civilian, stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and we moved into what is now called Lanewood 6 of Xenia, and we saw our house being built, and we lived there for a long time. Part of my childhood was spent in Pennsylvania, and we moved back to the exact same house because we rented it out. I graduated from Xenia High School in 1973, got married in Xenia, moved away for a while my husband at that time was in the service, and we moved back to Xenia. So Xenia has been my home for a long time.
A wonderful history of service in your family as well.
There is.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your childhood in Xenia?
Oh my. My childhood in Xenia was good. I remember moving away and coming back. It was sad to move away from Xenia. I had my best friends who lived next door to me, had grown up with them from the time I was 4 and didn't want to leave them. But when we came back, they still lived there. So most of our community around where I lived in Lanewood 6 on Omar Drive, everybody had been there from day one and stayed there, and most of them are still there, or their kids are still in their houses. Everybody knew everybody, everybody took care of everybody else's kids. When we came back from Pennsylvania, my mom and dad wanted another child, and they applied through Greene County to get a child, and eventually a baby was placed with mom and dad, a baby girl. And soon after, my mom and dad found out they were pregnant. And in 6 months, they had another baby girl. So my sisters are a year and 2 days apart and a lot younger than me. But we all remember good times of growing up in Xenia. My mom was a Girl Scout leader. My parents were very active in our church. Church was very important to me. My youth group was very important, all again in Xenia. I remember my sisters running the neighborhood, it seemed, babysitting them a lot, graduating was very important to me.
I'm sure it was. How old were you when the tornado occurred?
I was 19. I had graduated the year before, went to college in Indiana, and did not like the course of study, decided to come home, enrolled in Sinclair, and changed my major, and a bunch of upheaval. So I was 19 when it happened, and single, still living at home.
Can you walk me through what happened that day?
How many times would you like to know? Yeah. It started out to be just a regular kind of a day. My sisters went to school. Dad was off for some reason that day, and I can't remember why, and I can't ask them anymore either. But he was home. He liked gardening, so I'm thinking something was going on, that he felt it was a good day to till the garden or something. But it was a nice day. It started off kind of warm. I went outside, was working in the yard, playing with some flowers and doing some chores for mom and dad outside. Decided to get a little bit of sun also. The weather kind of turned a little bit ominous. We started, I think, having a tornado watch. Not a warning or anything, but that wasn't that unusual. I decided since I couldn't get any more sun, I'd go inside and get ready to go downtown and apply for a job. I didn't have a job, and since I had moved back home, I thought I'd go downtown and see if I could find a job. So my dad had just bought me a used, new for me, car. It was a Dodge Dart GT, cream color. It was gorgeous. I loved it. Bucket seats and everything, leather interior. Got in my car, and you know, back in the day that I was interviewing back then, you didn't wear jeans, you didn't wear pants. If you were going for an interview, you wore hose and a dress, and that was just what you did. even in through high school, we didn't wear jeans or pants. It just wasn't the regulation back then. So I had been dressed up, so to speak, to go for an interview. Decided to stop at Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's exactly where I thought my first interview should be. It was about 4 o'clock, not too busy, and I thought that would be a good time to not bother the manager. And went in, and I had a raincoat on because it was kind of looking like it was going to get misty, and again, the watches were out. So I went in, asked for an application, sat at the window. There you could see the window and the cars in the parking lot, and filled out my application. Was just waiting to talk to the manager when a couple of extra people came in from the parking lot and said that they thought they saw a tornado, and we all turned around because it was the opposite way I was facing. And sure enough, it looked like the 3 fingers that you could see off in the distance, 2 and then 3, and pulling back up way off in the distance. And for sure you weren't positive what was going on, but you thought it was, especially with a watch out. And I remember a couple of people left the inside part of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm thinking, they're crazy people. I'm not sure why they would go out, but I thought it was safe inside. Yeah, right. But one other lady, an older lady, stayed, and the manager was there, and somebody who was working with the manager that day. I don't know if you remember Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's kind of similar to today. There's a wall with a door, and then they have like a pass-through, so you can put the food in and out. So we went behind, the manager said we should go behind the door, and presuming it was like a room, when it really wasn't a room because you had this big opening. And then the lights went out, and we decided to lock arms in like a little circle, the 4 of us, and get behind the door. And I remember taking my glasses off and putting them in my pocket. I'm not sure what I thought that would happen, but I put my glasses in my pocket and we locked arms. Well, then the winds came and howled, and instead of being afraid of the tornado, I actually became afraid of the fryer grease that was cooking the chicken than instead of the tornado, and started wondering what's going to happen with frying grease. You know, is it going to fly on us or whatever? But I didn't think too much about the tornado. We didn't have enough reference at that time to be too concerned about the tornado. At least I didn't. So after it happened, you could feel things whipping around your ankles, and you could feel things trying to pull at your hair. But we didn't go anywhere. We stayed right behind the door. And when it kind of passed, we all kind of looked at each other. We were all there. It was a mess in the back part of the restaurant. But I literally think that I expected to walk out the door and get in my car and drive home. Of course, that's what I expected. The lady who had forgotten about it, she remembered she had a dog in her car, and a little dog. And he was alive. He was in an upturned seat, hiding. He survived. Some man brought him into her. She was happy about that, and it was kind of like, wow. And just as we opened the door that we were hiding behind, you looked out and there was no windows. There was no roof, and there was devastation beyond my imagination. It kind of like transported in a blink of an eye, a switch of a light. I was somewhere else. It was bad. I remember originally pulling in from Main Street to pull into the parking lot at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and my car was facing this way. When I came out, it was facing this way. I moved down a couple spots. But my car was riddled with holes in it that looked like a big shotgun had just blown it to pieces all around the sides. And I went out and looked at it to see, could I drive it home? No, I couldn't have done that, but there was no way to get home because of the streets. But it was like pieces of ironwork, probably from the Catholic church and the Catholic school just a block away. It's like little pieces of ironwork just filled my car and all in my car. And the pictures that you see with things jammed up in between a rim of a tire and the wheel, yeah, then my car looked like that too. My windows were blown out, and it was just not a pretty cream-colored car anymore. But at that point, I kind of had a realization that this wasn't going to get me home, and thought I would try to get home by myself. I didn't have anybody downtown. I didn't know anybody who lived downtown. And then I remember there was a family who lived, I don't know the name of the street because I don't think it's there anymore. I don't know if it is or not. Somewhere over behind near where Kmart used to be. They had a house, and I thought, they'll be home. I can walk to their house. They'll take care of me until I can get home. I got over there, kind of over there by way of crawling over lots of junk and walking through streets and seeing people that were dazed as I was, only to get to their house and saw that the entire house was off of the foundation and the whole house was just sitting in the street. And it wasn't until then that I remembered that they moved like a couple months before that over to Arrowhead. But at that time, I had forgotten that. And you can see their basement foundation, and it was terrible. So then I thought, I guess I'm on my own, I need to go on home. Well, at the time, I hadn't thought about my family being home or not. When I left, my family was not at home. Dad and Mom and the girls went to Burger Chef's, I think maybe on Woodman or somewhere in Dayton, and they went to the Dayton Mall. So they didn't know where I was. I didn't know where they were. I knew they had gone to the Dayton Mall, but didn't know anything else. So I started to get worried. Then, as you get down around the corner and behind McKinley, that wasn't McKinley School anymore, you have to cross a derailed train. And you see it and you don't really know, should I try to cross, should I not? What are they full of, what are they not? Is there sparks, is there not? Should I walk down towards Kroger's area or walk back towards, what was a Sugar Shack? I didn't know what to do. So I tried to get across, and I stayed mostly on, I think they still call that Dayton Avenue right there, I don't know. Up then started going up near A&W, where several people lost their lives because the entire roof of A&W drive-in part had fallen on them, and just walked on up the street. And by that time I was just hardly beside myself, didn't really know what to do, wanted to run but couldn't run the rest of the way. I was tired, had already taken more than an hour and a half or so just to get that way. I hadn't even paid attention. I realized I hadn't put my glasses on. I reached in my pocket, pulled out my glasses, and my pockets were full of what I would call cinders, like from asphalt shingles or maybe the road, and gravel and pieces of glass and plastic were loaded in my pockets. But I did put my glasses on. They survived the whole ordeal. I had worn glasses since I was in second grade, so it was like a second nature, to not have them on. It's like, oh yeah, I gotta do that. And about that time, my dad had been out looking for me, and two friends of mine had been looking for me. And one of the people found me, not my dad, and went back home. I was fortunate. My family was unaffected. My immediate family was unaffected physically. Our house survived. Nothing happened to my house, only the car and me. Standing out front, a lot of people from our little neighborhood were concerned and talking to me about different things. And just as we were talking, it had been probably 2 hours or more since the tornado. A lady was standing, my neighbor was standing next to our driveway talking to me, and several other people were around off in the yard. And all of a sudden out of the sky fell a big piece of metal in between us talking. And it was like, that was just like, oh, that could have landed on somebody. But it just came down with a boom. It was very, very scary. We lost our power off and on throughout the next, few days. My dad and Mom were very involved in helping the tornado rescue efforts. My sisters went to Cox School, which is just within walking distance of where we lived. And my dad helped with what they called the helicopter runs between Cox School and the hospital. Cox was used as a place for some of the workers in the community to come in and be fed, to take a break They brought in helicopters with supplies, and Dad helped with those. My mom loved to cook, and she helped cook for the people and was gone most of the time. So I stayed at the home and babysat my two sisters most of the time. So that's what I remember about the day. And then that night, we had another tornado warning, even though it had turned cold, and it actually snowed overnight. We went to a friend's house that had a basement. My house didn't have a basement. And that's what I remember about that day. But the weeks after that was the hardest part, I think, for most people. Whether you were unaffected physically by the tornado or emotionally, I still kind of think I have PTSD from it. I do okay if a tornado watch is issued. A tornado warning is issued, I'm not so good. And I remember two things that I learned from that. One thing I didn't say was that my dad went home, I don't know how long it was, a few days after the tornado. He went down to Kentucky Fried Chicken parking lot and drove my car home. The car drove, the engine was fine. He sat on the junk that was in there and drove it home. So I always remember, wear good shoes if a tornado warning's coming and been issued, and get your car keys, because your car will start regardless if it looks like it won't. So Dad drove my car home a couple days later, but it was difficult during that time. I had a lot of friends, people at church who lost everything, who lost pictures and possessions and stories that it's just hard to remember how many you've heard along the way.
What do you think have been the long-term effects of the tornado on Xenia? You've been in and out, kind of back and forth. What do you think on that?
I'm not sure if you mean physically, how it looks or how it is. I think we lost a sense of community, personally. I know we lost a lot of historical buildings. We lost some beautiful buildings. Neild Funeral Home was just gorgeous. They have a nice place now, but it's not the same. Adair's Furniture, I remember Xenia Hotel, and some historic places. There was a different sense also back then. I thought a lot of people used to say there was the north end of Xenia. Okay, if you lived in the north end of Xenia, it was more impressive than if you lived in Lanewood. I don't know that I remember so many stereotypical things at the moment when I was that age, but I heard about them a little bit later. But I don't think that exists in Xenia, and that in a way is okay with me. But I think we lost a sense of community for downtown. Then after a while, maybe you do or don't know, they started having old-fashioned days downtown Xenia. And it seemed like the community sense came back. But then that changed too and became something different. It was moved out to the park, and downtown Xenia was kind of left out of it. And that part I hate. I like to see some of the smaller businesses coming in now. I try to frequent them as much as possible. I appreciate people still being here, like Xenia Shoe and Leather. They're here through thick and thin, and I'm glad of that. My husband works for the county, and I know a lot of people in the county. My sister works for the county. I think it's a great place to live, but I think it's different than what it used to be, a little bit.
Are there any other details you want to share at this point?
Oh my. No, but I think the thing that you're doing is really important. I'm glad that you saw it in your Greene County department to do this, because 50 years, gosh, I can't even believe I'm even past that age, but I think it's important to record what people remember. My little story might not be that important individually to anybody else, but all of them combined, I think, is very impressive. And we went through so much at the time. Everything looks a lot different downtown. People are a lot different. Some people aren't around to tell their story anymore. So I think it's important what you're doing and recording it. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell my little part of the story too. I thank you for having me.
Well, we thank you for sharing your experience.